never imagined my life would unravel like this. Everything I thought I knew about trust, relationships, and professional success got turned completely upside down. My name is Ryan, and this is the story of how someone I loved destroyed everything I'd worked for. Sarah and I had been together for nearly 2 years. On paper, she seemed perfect, ambitious, encouraging, always pushing me to reach higher. I genuinely believed she had my back. But 3 weeks ago, I discovered something that shattered that illusion entirely. Let me give you some context. I'd been grinding away at Harrison & Associates for about 3 years. It's a cutthroat industry where I constantly felt like I was trying to catch up. While others seemed to effortlessly charm their way up the ladder, I kept my head down, worked late nights, and hoped someone would eventually notice my dedication. Spoiler alert, they rarely did. 6 months back, I got passed over for a position I desperately wanted. The role went to someone who, frankly, didn't seem nearly as qualified. Sarah was livid when I told her. She kept insisting I was far more talented than anyone else there, that I worked harder than everyone combined. I appreciated the support, but what could I do? I figured I just needed to keep proving myself. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with that answer. She started asking pointed questions about my supervisor, David Morrison. What's he like? Why doesn't he recognize your value? At the time, I thought she was just being a supportive partner. Looking back, those questions weren't casual at all. Then 3 weeks ago, something unexpected happened. Morrison called me into his office, something that rarely occurred unless there was a problem. My anxiety spiked as I walked through his door. But instead of criticism, he said something I never anticipated. Ryan, I've been observing your contributions lately. I think it's time we gave you an opportunity for advancement. I was stunned. He outlined a new position with significantly more responsibility and a substantial salary increase. Everything I'd been working toward seemed to finally be happening. When I left his office, I immediately called Sarah. She answered instantly. And when I shared the news, she screamed with excitement so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. That evening, she went all out, champagne, an elaborate home-cooked meal, the full celebration. She kept saying how she knew this would happen, how this was just the beginning of my success. I thought she was simply proud of me. The first warning sign appeared about a week later. I overheard Sarah on a late-night phone call. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but I caught fragments of her conversation. Things like, he doesn't suspect anything, and totally worth it, wouldn't you say? When she returned to the living room, I asked who she'd been talking to. She brushed it off, claiming it was just her best friend discussing something trivial. Her tone felt strange, but I didn't press further. Then things got weirder at work. Morrison started acting unusually friendly toward me. He'd stop by my workspace frequently, making awkward small talk. Once, he even commented, "You're fortunate to have someone like Sarah." It seemed like an odd, random observation. Why would my boss even mention my girlfriend? They'd only met briefly at one company gathering months earlier. Everything came crashing down this past weekend. Sarah and I were having dinner when I casually mentioned how surprising my promotion had been. I said something about Morrison finally recognizing my capabilities. Sarah didn't smile, she smirked. Then she said, well, maybe he just needed some proper convincing. I laughed, assuming she was joking. But she didn't laugh back. Instead, she said, Ryan, you have absolutely no idea what I've sacrificed for you. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then said she'd had a conversation with Morrison to make sure he understood my value. A conversation? I asked, what kind of conversation? She looked directly at me and said, I slept with him. It was the only way to make him see what you're capable of. For a moment, I thought she was pulling some cruel prank. I even laughed nervously, waiting for her to say she was kidding. But she just sat there, completely calm, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of our relationship. You did what? I finally managed to say. My voice sounded distant and shaky, like it belonged to someone else. I did it for us, she said matter-of-factly. You deserved that promotion, Ryan, and now you have it. Isn't that what really matters? I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. Was I supposed to feel grateful? Angry, betrayed. I felt all of those things simultaneously, along with complete disbelief. She kept talking, saying things like, I knew this was the only solution, and you should actually be thanking me. Thanking her? For what? For completely violating boundaries I didn't even know needed to be stated? For turning my promotion, something I'd worked incredibly hard for, into something tainted that I could never feel proud of. The days following Sarah's confession were absolute torture. Part of me wanted to end things immediately, but another part wondered if maybe she genuinely thought she was helping me in some twisted way. I know that sounds absurd, but when you've been with someone for 2 years, you don't just flip a switch and stop caring, even when they've done something unforgivable. Sarah didn't think she'd done anything wrong. In fact, she doubled down, insisting this was a team effort. She kept saying things like, "You wouldn't be where you are without my help," and "I've always supported you when nobody else would." She genuinely seemed to believe she'd done something noble and selfless. Meanwhile, I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was betrayal. But then a terrible thought crept in. What if she was right? What if I wouldn't have gotten this promotion without her intervention? That thought made me physically ill. I'd spent years working diligently, hoping someone would notice my potential. Now I couldn't even be certain if I'd earned this position on my own merit. Sarah had taken something I should have felt proud of and transformed it into a source of deep shame. And the worst part? She couldn't understand why that hurt me so profoundly. About 10 days after her confession, I started noticing strange behavior from Morrison. He'd always been somewhat distant and professional, but now he was going out of his way to interact with me. He'd stop by my desk unnecessarily or make uncomfortable small talk in the break room. It felt like he was trying to remind me of what had happened, as if I could ever forget. I started avoiding him whenever possible, but the tension was always present, simmering beneath every interaction. Every time he looked at me, I felt like he knew something I didn't. The paranoia began consuming me. I questioned everything. Was my promotion genuinely about my performance, or was it entirely because of Sarah? Were my colleagues gossiping about me? Did they know? I felt constantly watched, like everyone in the office was in on some humiliating secret that I was the last to understand. Things escalated when I received an unexpected call from a coworker named Jennifer. We'd always gotten along professionally, but weren't particularly close outside work, so her call caught me off guard. Her voice sounded hesitant, almost nervous. "I don't know if I should be telling you this," she said, "but I feel like you deserve to know." She explained that rumors were circulating around the office about Sarah and Morrison. Apparently, people had overheard conversations at the recent company event, and pieced together that something inappropriate had occurred between them. Jennifer didn't know the full details, but she warned me to be careful because these kinds of rumors could seriously damage my career. So not only had Sarah betrayed me personally, but now her actions were actively threatening my professional reputation. Everything I'd worked so hard to build was in jeopardy, and I was powerless to stop it. That night, I confronted Sarah again. I told her about the rumors and asked if there was anything else I needed to know. At first, she got defensive, claiming people always gossip and I shouldn't let it affect me. But when I pressed harder, she admitted she'd been in regular contact with Morrison since my promotion. She claimed she was just ensuring he continued to support me in my new role, but the way she said it made my skin crawl. "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" I asked her. "You've turned my entire career into a complete joke. I can't even walk into the office without wondering if everyone knows what happened." Her response? "You're being overly dramatic. Nobody cares how you got the promotion. They only care that you have it." That was the moment I realized we weren't just on different pages. We were living in completely different worlds. To Sarah, this was all just a means to an end. She didn't care about the damage she'd caused to me or my reputation. She only cared that she'd helped me succeed by her own twisted logic. I've been staying with my friend Marcus for the past several days, trying to figure out my next move. I haven't told anyone the full story, not my family, not my coworkers, nobody. Honestly, I'm embarrassed. How do you even explain something like this? "Oh, by the way, my girlfriend slept with my boss to advance my career, and now everything's falling apart." It sounds like something from a terrible television drama. After everything that happened, I decided I needed to confront Morrison directly. I needed to know the truth. Was my promotion based on my actual performance, or was it entirely because of Sarah? I spent days debating whether to have this conversation. I was terrified. What if he confirmed what I already suspected? What if he denied everything and I was left feeling even more powerless? But I couldn't let this uncertainty hang over me any longer. When I walked into his office, I could tell he knew exactly why I was there. He gave me that same smug expression he'd been wearing since the promotion and said, "What's on your mind, Ryan?" I told him I wanted to discuss my promotion. Without missing a beat, he said, "Is this about Sarah?" My heart sank. The fact that he brought her up before I even mentioned her name told me everything I needed to know. Still, I pushed forward. I asked him directly if my promotion was based on my work or if it had anything to do with Sarah. His response was chilling. "You're a dedicated worker," he said, leaning back in his chair casually. "But let's be honest, hard work only gets you so far in this industry. Sometimes it's about who's willing to go the extra mile for you." He didn't even try to deny it. He went on to explain that Sarah had helped him see my potential in a new light, and that he wanted to reward someone who had the right kind of support behind them. The way he said support made me feel sick. I left his office feeling more humiliated than I'd ever felt in my entire life. That night, I went back to Marcus's place and called Sarah. I told her what Morrison had said, hoping she'd finally understand the damage she'd caused. Instead, she doubled down completely. "Do you see now why I had to do it?" she said, as if this was all perfectly reasonable. "This is how the real world works, Ryan. You're too naive to understand, but I did what was necessary to secure our future." That was it for me. I told her we were finished and that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She didn't cry or beg me to stay. She simply said, "You'll regret this someday. You'll realize I was the only person who truly cared about your success." I hung up and blocked her on everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally begin to move forward. But of course, Sarah wasn't finished yet. A few days later, I started hearing whispers around the office that Sarah and Morrison had been seen together outside of work. At first, I thought it was just typical office gossip, but then I saw actual proof. Someone sent me a screenshot from Sarah's social media. She'd posted a picture of herself and Morrison at an upscale restaurant with the caption, "Some partnerships are simply worth it." I couldn't believe it. Not only had she destroyed our relationship and my career, but now she was openly dating my boss. It felt like she was deliberately rubbing it in my face. Worse, the rumors at work intensified dramatically. People were openly speculating about whether my promotion was legitimate or if I'd simply been riding Sarah's coattails. My professional reputation, the thing I'd worked so incredibly hard to build, was in complete shambles. The final blow came just last week. Morrison called me into his office again, but this time his demeanor was entirely different. He told me he'd reassessed my performance in the new role and didn't think I was meeting expectations. He claimed he was restructuring the department and that my position was no longer necessary. In other words, I was being fired. I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about my performance at all. It was retaliation. Sarah had clearly told him about our breakup, and now he was punishing me for it. I wanted to fight back, to expose what had really happened, but how could I? He was my boss, and he held all the power. I left his office feeling completely defeated. So here I am now, unemployed, single, and trying to figure out how to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. Part of me feels like I should have seen this coming. Sarah always had a way of taking control of situations, but I never imagined she'd go this far. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. Maybe I shouldn't have accepted the promotion in the first place. Maybe I should have confronted her immediately when things started feeling off. But at the end of the day, none of this was my fault. Sarah and Morrison made their choices, and I'm the one paying the price. The hardest part is accepting that someone I trusted completely could betray me so thoroughly. I've learned that sometimes the people closest to us can cause the most damage, especially when they convince themselves they're acting in our best interests. Real support doesn't involve manipulation, betrayal, or crossing fundamental boundaries. Real support means respecting someone enough to let them succeed on their own terms. I don't know what comes next for me. I'm working on rebuilding my career and my reputation, one day at a time. It won't be easy, but at least now I'm doing it on my own terms, with my integrity intact. And that's something no one can take away from me.